Hi, I'm Anna Olson, and I'm so glad you've joined me here because guess what I'm making? Right here on Oh Yum, it's cookie time. I make dozens and dozens of cookies over the holiday season, and this has become actually a new favorite. You have not seen this anywhere before. It is my gingerbread crinkle cookies. So let me get right into the cookie recipe, which is easy enough to mix by hand. It's a classic drop cookie style, and crinkle cookies have always been a part of my holiday tradition. I think chocolate crinkles are probably the most familiar, and they get their name because they have that crackle, the icing sugar on the surface that reveals through the cracks the chocolate underneath. And I thought, why stick just with chocolate when you could make a gingerbread version? So I've got half a cup of unsalted butter here, softened to room temperature, and I'm going to add to that a cup of light brown sugar. You'll see all the measurements, the full recipe is below in the description. And for those of you who don't use volume measurements, cups, teaspoons, etc., you'll also see the weighted equivalent. So really, however you like to measure your ingredients, I've got you covered. I'm just creaming the butter and sugar together. This is an important step because the friction of the sugar granules with the butter actually aerates the butter, and this helps develop structure in your cookie so it holds together okay. This is really important if you're making holiday shortbread. If you ever make the same recipe year over year and yet you see it varies, well, it could be just this simple step of beating your butter and sugar together. It's time to add my 1 egg, and I make sure my egg is at room temperature. I always use my butter as my guide to tell me what temperature my other ingredients should be. So if a recipe calls for room temperature butter, then your egg should be at room temperature. Simply because they incorporate better together if they're at a like temperature. I'll work this in. I mean, this is standard cookie stuff. A chocolate chip cookie starts virtually the same way. But as we move along, you'll see the add-ons that really give this a gingerbread character, including half a cup of fancy molasses. Blackstrap molasses is the stronger, darker molasses that's better for bread making. It's a little bit bitter. Fancy molasses is a little lighter, and typically the molasses you use in any gingerbread, whether it's a cake, a cutout cookie, or this style of drop cookie. And now I'm ready to sift my dry ingredients. I've got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And here in my dish, I've already measured my 2 teaspoons of ginger, 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, as well as 1/4 teaspoon of clove and salt. Immediately you can smell that combination of the spices that just tells you this is gingerbread. This is definitely one of those recipes that makes the house smell incredible. All right, now I've got a nice batter here, but one more ingredient to add, and this is a bit of a funny story. When I was first playing with this recipe, I was madly putting ingredients together, and then I looked down and realized I still had half a cup of granulated sugar that I forgot to add at the beginning. So I thought, well, I'm not gonna throw the batter away and start again. So I added it at the very end, and didn't I discover that by doing this, I get a better crinkle out of my gingerbread crinkle cookie. That real profile between the earthy brown gingerbread cookie and the white icing sugar showed through even better. So now it's a part of the recipe. I also find I get a chewier cookie by adding this little bit of sugar right at the end. I think it's because the sugar doesn't dissolve until it hits the heat of the oven. So that guarantees it stays nice and chewy. Okay, now I'm ready to portion my cookies. I've got my baking tray ready, lined with parchment, It really is the only way to bake cookies. You can reuse the parchment, but it's easier to clean your tray, and then you don't have to grease it every time you make a batch. I use a scoop and portion my cookies, and I have here a bowl of sifted icing sugar. And I'll just drop the scoops right in. And you want to give your cookies a generous tumble in the icing sugar. Make sure they're coated and then coated some more. There you go. You want to leave a couple inches space between the cookies so they have room to spread. When it comes to making this recipe ahead, what I like to do is actually scoop the batter like this, but I don't roll it in the icing sugar. Then I put them on a tray, close together is fine, and I chill or freeze them for an hour. That way then I can pack them into a container or a resealable bag and pull out a few as I need them. I let them thaw in a baking tray, roll them in the icing sugar, and pop them in the oven. That way you can have freshly baked cookies whenever you want, but all the work's been done ahead of time. All right, now I've got a full tray here, so before I pop them in the oven, I just quickly flatten them down with the palm of my hand. And now they can go into a 325 oven, and guess what? They only take 10 minutes to bake. They're fun to watch because they collapse, expand, crinkle, puff up. Then I have one last trick that really keeps these gingerbread crinkle cookies nice and soft in the center. The last move to guarantee I have a chewy gingerbread crinkle cookie is to give the whole pan a smack on the counter right out of the oven. See how they immediately collapsed? Now I'll move them over to my cooling rack, and I give them just 5 minutes to set on the tray because otherwise they would actually break. They're so soft right now, but in 5 minutes I can lift them from the tray to the cooling rack to cool completely. Okay, let's be serious. Not quite completely. I need to try one. All right. Let me test to see I can lift one. Yes. If it doesn't bend when you lift it, then you know it has cooled enough to transfer to the cooling rack. Once your cookies have cooled, then you can plate them, pack them, store them, wrap them up for gifting. But whatever you do, make sure you save at least one for yourself. Chef's reward, the first cookie. Okay, ultimately, when you eat a crinkle cookie, it ends up all over you. Just warning you, and warning myself, because it's going to happen. It's no wonder a crinkle cookie is a holiday favorite with that crispy outside and the soft, chewy center, and of course, all those beautiful spices. It is one of my personal holiday favorites, and I really hope it becomes one of yours. Happy holidays!